The pressure alarm shrieked through Heliostation's diplomatic quarter, a sound that made Alex Carter's stomach drop, even as his body moved on pure instinct. 20 years of maintaining life support systems had trained him to recognize that particular pitch, catastrophic decompression, the kind that turned breathing into a luxury you could measure in seconds. Alex sprinted down the curved corridor, his magnetic boots clicking against the deck plating in a rhythm that matched his hammering heart. The environmental control panel on his wrist blazed red, showing a massive pressure drop in reception chamber 3. Of all the days for a hull breach, it had to be during the Aurelian delegation's arrival. He rounded the corner just as the emergency bulkheads began their descent. Through the narrowing gap, he caught sight of her Empress Seraphina Illith of the Aurelian Empire, her iridescent robes billowing in the escaping atmosphere, her long silver hair whipping around her face like liquid mercury. But it was her tail that caught his attention, that distinctive appendage that marked her species, now thrashing wildly as she struggled against the pull of vacuum. The math was simple and brutal. She had maybe 10 seconds before the pressure differential knocked her unconscious. 20 before irreversible damage. The bulkhead would seal in 5. Alex didn't think, he dove. His hands found purchase on something smooth and warm her tail. The contact sent an electric shock up his arm, but he held tight, using every ounce of strength to haul her backward through the shrinking gap. She gasped, a sound that seemed to resonate through his bones, and then her tail coiled around his wrist with surprising strength. They tumbled through together, just as the bulkhead slammed shut with finality. Alex's back hit the deck hard enough to drive the air from his lungs, and suddenly he had an armful of alien Empress, her weight pressing him into the cold metal floor. For a moment, neither moved. Alex became acutely aware of several things at once, the blessed hiss of atmosphere flooding back into the corridor from emergency vents, the way Seraphina's chest heaved against his as she gulped in precious air, and, most notably, the fact that her tail remained firmly wrapped around his wrist, the grip tightening rather than loosening. "Your Majesty," he wheezed, trying to be respectful despite their undignified position. "Are you injured?" She lifted her head, and Alex found himself staring into eyes that shifted color like oil on water, deep purple, bleeding into gold at the edges. Her pupils were vertical slits that dilated as she focused on his face. "You touched my tail," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that human vocal cords couldn't produce. It wasn't an accusation exactly, more like someone stating that water was wet or space was cold. "I apologize for the breach of protocol," Alex began, still trying to catch his breath. "But the alternative was watching you get sucked into vacuum, and that seemed like worse diplomacy." A strange expression crossed her features, something between shock and what might have been amusement. "You don't understand. When an Aurelian's tail is grasped during a life-threatening situation, when the contact saves a life—" She paused, seeming to search for words in Terran Standard. "It triggers the tethering." "The what now?" Before she could answer, the corridor filled with people. Security personnel in full environmental suits burst through the emergency airlocks, followed by what Alex recognized as the Aurelian Honor Guard, tall, graceful beings with the same distinctive tails, though none as elaborate as their empresses. "Majesty." The lead guard's translated voice carried clear alarm. "The atmospheric breach, we must evacuate you to—" He stopped mid-sentence, his gaze fixing on where Seraphina's tail remained coiled around Alex's wrist. The guard's expression went through several rapid changes before settling on something that looked remarkably like panic. Seraphina rose with fluid grace, and Alex scrambled to his feet beside her, acutely aware that her tail showed no sign of releasing him. If anything, it seemed to have made itself comfortable, the smooth scales warm against his skin through the thin fabric of his work uniform. "Cancel the evacuation," Seraphina commanded, her bearing every inch the imperial ruler despite her disheveled appearance. Summon the Council of Bonds, and bring the historical texts. Her gaze swept over Alex, taking in his maintenance uniform and the tools hanging from his belt. Also, perhaps someone could explain to Mr. Carter, Alex supplied. Alex Carter, Senior Environmental Systems Engineer. Mr. Carter about what he has just initiated. The next hour passed in a blur of activity that made Alex's head spin. He found himself in an ornate meeting room that the Aurelians had somehow transformed in the few hours since their arrival. Holographic stars danced across the ceiling, creating a perfect replica of their home system, while the air carried a subtle scent, like cinnamon mixed with ozone. Serafina sat across from him at a table that seemed to be carved from a single piece of some translucent crystal, her tail still maintaining its grip on his wrist. Between them, an elderly Aurelian with scales that had faded to pale pearl manipulated a holographic interface, pulling up what looked like ancient texts. The rite of tethering, the elder began, his translated voice carrying the weight of ceremony. Dates back over 3,000 cycles, when an Aurelian's tail is grasped by another during mortal peril, and that grasp saves their life. An ancient biological imperative activates. Alex tried to process this. Biological imperative. The saved becomes bound to the savior, the elder continued, gesturing to where Serafina's tail maintained its coil. In your terms, Mr. Carter, you have become Her Majesty's tethered guardian. The bond will not release until... He paused, consulting his texts. Until the debt of life is balanced. And how long does that usually take? The silence that followed was not encouraging. Serafina spoke, her tone carefully neutral. The shortest recorded tethering in our history lasted 43 cycles. Alex did the mental math. Aurelian cycles were roughly equivalent to Terran years. You're telling me your tail is going to be attached to my arm for the next 4 decades. The longest, Serafina continued, as if he hadn't spoken, lasted until death. Alex became very aware of the tool belt digging into his ribs, the grease stain on his sleeve, and the fact that he'd been in the middle of recalibrating sewage recyclers when the alarm went off. This was not how he'd pictured meeting alien royalty. There must be some mistake, he said. I'm not qualified for whatever this position entails. I fix air scrubbers and fusion cores. I'm not guardian material. The tethering does not ask for qualifications, the elder said with what might have been sympathy. It simply is. A soft chime interrupted what Alex was about to say, probably for the best, since he wasn't sure it would have been properly diplomatic. His wrist panel lit up with an urgent message from his department. If I may, he said, gesturing to the display. There's still the matter of whatever caused that hull breach. Serafina inclined her head, and Alex pulled up the environmental reports. What he saw made his blood run cold. This wasn't a hull breach, he said, fingers flying over the interface as he pulled up more data. Look at these readings. The pressure drop was localized, controlled. Someone vented that chamber deliberately. The honor guard stepped forward. Sabotage against Her Majesty. Not necessarily, Alex said, though his jaw tightened. The venting pattern is consistent with our emergency protocols for fire suppression. But... He frowned at the data. There was no fire, no heat bloom, no chemical signatures. Someone triggered a false emergency. Who has access to these systems? Serafina asked, and Alex noticed how her tail tightened slightly, whether from anger or concern. He couldn't tell. That's the problem. Environmental controls are managed by Heliarch Consortium. They run all life support operations in this sector. Alex pulled up another display, showing the corporate logo, a stylized sun surrounded by grasping hands. And they've been pushing hard for the new oxygen credit system. The elder made a sound that the translator rendered as a skeptical huff. We have heard of this system, charging beings for the very air they breathe. It's more complex than that, Alex said. though he shared the sentiment. They claim it's about resource management, ensuring sustainable consumption. But in practice, he gestured to the station schematic. The outer districts, where the immigrant workers live, have been experiencing conservation measures, reduced oxygen percentages during off-peak hours. How reduced? Serafina's voice carried a sharp edge. 15% below standard. Still survivable. But it affects cognitive function, energy levels, makes people more compliant. Alex called up atmospheric readings from the past month. And with the Atmospheric Accord Summit starting tomorrow, there have been rumors of demonstrations. So, someone tries to eliminate the Empress of the largest oxygen-producing empire in the sector. The guard's hand moved to his weapon. This is an act of war. Or a distraction, Alex said slowly, pieces clicking together in his mind. Make it look like an attack on the Aurelian delegation. Shift focus from the oxygen credit system. Maybe even use it as justification for tighter security measures on atmospheric controls. Serafina studied him with those color-shifting eyes. You speak as someone who has given this considerable thought. It's my job to keep people breathing, Alex said simply. Hard to do that when someone puts a price tag on air. A communication alert chimed, and one of the guards answered it. His expression grew troubled. Majesty, Director Cade Thorne of Heliarch requests an urgent meeting regarding the unfortunate incident. Of course he does, Alex muttered, then louder. Director Thorne oversees this sector's operations. He's also the primary advocate for the oxygen credit system. Then we shall meet with him, Serafina decided. Mr. Carter, as my tethered guardian, you will accompany me. I don't think that's, Alex began, then stopped as he realized the futility. The tail around his wrist wasn't giving him much choice in the matter. Right. Of course. Let me just grab my formal grease-stained coveralls. What might have been amusement flickered in Serafina's eyes. Your current attire will suffice. Sometimes it is valuable to remind others that essential work is performed by essential people. The meeting took place in Heliarch's sector of the station. All gleaming surfaces and holographic displays showing profit margins and efficiency ratings. Director Cade Thorne waited in a conference room that probably cost more to decorate than Alex made in a decade. He was human, or at least mostly the silver implants at his temples suggested cognitive enhancements, and his eyes held that peculiar flatness that came from seeing everything through data streams. Your Majesty, Thorne said, rising smoothly. I cannot express how mortified we are about the malfunction. I assure you, we're conducting a full investigation. Malfunction. Alex couldn't help himself. That's what we're calling it. Thorne's gaze flicked to Alex, taking in the maintenance uniform and dismissing him just as quickly. And you are? Her Majesty's tethered guardian, Serafina said before Alex could respond. He speaks with my voice in all matters. That caused Thorne to recalculate, though his expression didn't change. I see. How traditional. Well, Mr. Carter, the engineer who just proved it wasn't a malfunction. Alleged sabotage, then, Thorne conceded, with a thin smile. Though I fail to see who would benefit from harming our esteemed visitors. The Aurelian Empire has always been supportive of progressive resource management. Is that what we're calling oxygen restriction now? Alex asked. Progressive. Serafina's tail tightened slightly, a warning. He realized. But she spoke before Thorne could respond. Director, I understand the Atmospheric Accord Summit begins tomorrow. The Aurelian delegation came prepared to discuss mutual cooperation. However, after today's events, we have concerns. Understandable concerns, Thorne said smoothly. Which is why I'd like to propose enhanced security measures. Heliarch can provide full atmospheric isolation for your delegation, independent life support, sealed environments. No chance of another incident. Isolation, Serafina repeated. How convenient. And I suppose this isolation would prevent us from touring the outer districts, speaking with the workers who live under your conservation measures. Thorne's smile never wavered. For your own safety, of course. Of course, Alex echoed dryly. He pulled up his wrist display. Speaking of safety, I notice oxygen levels in District 7 just dropped another 2%. Emergency maintenance? Scheduled optimization. The algorithms determine the most efficient distribution based on usage patterns and productivity metrics. Thorne gestured to the displays around them. Surely Her Majesty understands the importance of resource efficiency. The Aurelian Empire's atmospheric processors are marvels of engineering. Indeed, Serafina said, which is why we give their output freely to all who need it. Air is not a commodity. Director, it is life. A romantic notion, Thorne replied. But romanticism doesn't maintain complex systems or ensure sustainable consumption. The oxygen credit system creates accountability. Every breath measured, every molecule accounted for. It's the future of resource management. Alex felt his jaw clench. It's the future of control. You're not managing resources, you're managing people. Mr. Carter. Thorne's voice carried a warning. Perhaps you should leave policy discussions to those who understand the bigger picture. Your job is to maintain the systems, not question them. Actually, Alex said, standing and forcing Serafina to rise with him thanks to their connection. My job is to keep people alive. Hard to do that when you're slowly suffocating them for profit margins. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Thorne's augmented eyes flickered with data streams. I think this meeting has run its course. Your Majesty, I hope you'll consider our security recommendations. The summit begins in 18 hours. It would be unfortunate if further malfunctions were to occur. It was barely veiled threat, and everyone knew it. Serafina stood with regal grace, her tail maintaining its grip on Alex as they moved in forced synchronization. We will take your recommendations under advisement, Director. Though I should mention the Aurelian Empire has extensive experience with hostile environments. We know how to adapt when the air grows thin. They left without another word, though Alex could feel Thorne's enhanced gaze following them out. In the corridor, Serafina's guard moved closer. Majesty, perhaps the Director has a point about security. He has a point about control, Serafina corrected. Mr. Carter, these oxygen restrictions in the outer districts, how bad are they truly? Alex considered lying, softening the truth for diplomatic reasons. But something about the way she asked, the genuine concern in those shifting eyes, made him honest. Bad enough that children are showing developmental delays. Bad enough that workers are making mistakes from hypoxia-induced confusion. Bad enough that some families are making choices about who gets full rations and who doesn't. The guard made a shocked sound, but Serafina merely nodded slowly. And tomorrow, at the summit, they propose to expand this system to every major station and colony in the sector. They're calling it the future of sustainable living. Alex couldn't keep the bitterness from his voice. Sustainable for their profit margins. Maybe. Then we have much work to do before tomorrow. Serafina turned to her guard. Arrange meetings with the other delegations, quietly, and... She glanced at Alex. Find quarters for Mr. Carter adjoining mine. It seems we'll be spending considerable time together. Alex looked down at where her tail remained firmly coiled around his wrist. About that, is there any way to... I don't know. Pause this, I need to check the primary atmospheric processors. Make sure there aren't any other malfunctions planned. Where you go, I go, Serafina said simply. Such is the nature of the tethering. Though I confess, I've never heard of an Empress inspecting maintenance tunnels before. First time for everything, Alex said, managing a wry smile. Hope you don't mind getting those royal robes dirty. Mr. Carter, she said, and there was definitely amusement in her voice now. "I rule an empire of atmospheric processors. I've been in worse places than your maintenance tunnels." As they made their way through the station, Alex became aware of the stares they attracted. A human engineer in stained coveralls, walking arm in arm, or rather, arm and tail with alien royalty. News traveled fast on Helios Station, and by the time they reached the maintenance sector, a small crowd had gathered. "Is it true?" A young woman in the faded jumpsuit of an atmospheric tech pushed forward. "About the tethering." Alex recognized her Nika Patel, one of the few independent journalists who still covered the outer districts. "Nika, yeah, it's true. Bit of a long story." "Everything's a long story with you, Carter." She held up a recording device. "Your Majesty, would you care to comment on the assassination attempt?" "There was no assassination," Serafina said carefully. "Merely a technical malfunction that Mr. Carter prevented from becoming a tragedy." Nika's sharp eyes caught the emphasis. "Technical malfunction. Right. And this has nothing to do with tomorrow's summit with Heliarch pushing for system-wide adoption of oxygen credits." Before either could answer, an alarm chimed through the sector, not the sharp shriek of decompression, but the steady pulse that meant atmospheric adjustment. "They're dropping levels again," someone in the crowd said. "Third time this week." Alex checked his panel, anger flashing hot in his chest. 12% reduction in Sector C. That's where the Martian refugees are housed. "Can you override it?" Serafina asked. "Not from here. The controls are—" Alex stopped, suddenly aware of the crowd, of who might be listening. But Serafina squeezed his arm with her tail, a gesture that somehow conveyed both support and urgency. "The controls are locked behind Heliarch security," he finished. "But there might be another way. The processing stations have manual overrides, legacy systems from before the corporate takeover. If someone were to accidentally trigger a maintenance cycle—" "That sounds like something that would require an experienced engineer," Serafina said thoughtfully. "And perhaps an official inspection from the Aurelian delegation to ensure our atmospheric contributions are being properly distributed." Nika's recorder caught every word. "You're going to the outer districts, both of you." "We go where air is needed," Serafina said simply. "That is the Aurelian way." As they headed for the transport tubes, Alex felt a strange mix of emotions. Part of him was terrified he'd just effectively declared war on Heliarch, on the system that controlled the very air they breathed. But another part, a part that had been dormant too long, felt alive in a way it hadn't in years. "You realize what you're doing?" he asked Serafina quietly as they walked. "Thorne won't let this stand. He'll use every trick, every regulation, every bought official to stop us." "Then we'll have to be cleverer than he is," she replied. "Tell me, Mr. Carter, in your experience, what's stronger, corporate regulations or the need to breathe?" "Depends on who's doing the breathing," Alex said honestly. "The people in the outer districts don't have much voice." "They do now," Serafina said, and her tail tightened around his wrist, not painful, but firm, like a promise. "They have an Empress who cannot ignore their plight, and an engineer who knows how to make their air flow freely. Together, we might accomplish more than either could alone." Alex looked at her, really looked, and saw beyond the alien features and royal bearing to something more fundamental. Someone who understood that power meant nothing if people couldn't breathe. "You know, when I woke up this morning, becoming the galaxy's first tethered maintenance engineer wasn't on my schedule. And I didn't expect to tour sewage recyclers," Serafina replied. "Yet here we are." "Here we are," Alex agreed, and found himself smiling. "So, Your Majesty, ready to get those royal hands dirty?" "Mr. Carter," she said, matching his smile with one that transformed her alien features into something beautifully approachable. "I thought you'd never ask." As they descended toward the outer districts, where the air grew thin and hope thinner still, Alex felt the weight of what they were about to attempt. The summit was less than 18 hours away. Heliarch controlled every breath on the station, and he was connected literally to an alien Empress who seemed determined to upturn the entire system. It should have been terrifying. Instead, as Seraphina's tail pulsed gently around his wrist in what he was beginning to recognize as reassurance, Alex felt something he hadn't experienced in years of maintaining the status quo. Purpose. The real fight for air was about to begin. The maintenance transport shuddered as it descended through Helios Station's industrial layers, each level marking another step down the economic ladder. Alex watched the atmospheric readings on his panel drop incrementally. Nothing dangerous yet, but enough to make the point. The closer you lived to the hull, the less your breath was worth. "Your transport systems are inefficient," Seraphina observed, her tail adjusting its grip as the car jolted over worn mag rails. "On Aurelia, we use harmonized gravity wells." "On Aurelia, you probably don't calculate the cost per breath of maintaining them," Alex replied, noting how her guards struggled with the cramped space, clearly not designed for 7-foot-tall aliens. "Down here, efficiency means how little can we spend and still avoid lawsuits." The transport groaned to a halt at level C7, and the doors opened to reveal a world of perpetual twilight. The outer districts never saw real sunlight, just the filtered glow of emergency strips and the occasional flicker of advertising hollows promising better lives through oxygen credit optimization. A crowd had already gathered, word of their coming spreading through the underground networks faster than any official channel. Alex recognized faces maintenance crews he'd worked with, families from the Martian refugee sectors, even some of the modified humans whose augmentations let them survive on less oxygen, but marked them as different. Other, less than. Carter. A woman pushed through the crowd, her weathered face breaking into disbelief. "Alex Carter, what are you doing here with—" Her eyes widened as she took in Seraphina and her retinue. "Your Majesty." "Rosa," Alex greeted the shift supervisor he'd trained with 20 years ago. "We're here about the oxygen drops. 12% reduction is—" 15% as of an hour ago, Rosa corrected grimly. "They said it's temporary, just until the summit concludes. For security," she laughed bitterly. "Security from what? Breathing too deeply." Seraphina stepped forward, and Alex moved with her, their forced synchronization becoming slightly more natural. "Show us the affected areas. I want to see what Heliarch considers acceptable living conditions." Rosa led them through corridors that hadn't seen proper maintenance in years. The walls wept condensation from overtaxed recyclers, and every breath carried the metallic taste of air that had been processed too many times. Children played in alcoves, their games slower than they should be, their laughter coming in careful bursts to conserve breath. "The algorithm says we're within acceptable parameters," Rosa explained as they walked. 85% standard atmosphere is supposedly safe for extended periods. But that's for healthy adults at rest, not for children playing, not for workers hauling cargo, not for the elderly or sick. They entered what had once been a community center, now converted into makeshift housing for the latest wave of refugees. Families clustered in spaces divided by hanging fabric, each area containing the bare minimum for survival. The air hung thick and still, recyclers struggling to process the carbon dioxide of too many people in too small a space. "This is criminal," one of Seraphina's guards murmured, his translated voice carrying shock. "On Aurelia, even our prisoners breathe freely." "Welcome to efficiency," Alex said dryly. He moved to the nearest atmospheric control panel, fingers dancing over the interface. "Rosa, if I trigger a maintenance cycle from here, how long before Heliarch notices?" "Depends. The algorithms flag unusual patterns. But if it looks like routine maintenance—" She glanced at the crowd gathering around them. Maybe 20 minutes before someone comes to investigate. 20 minutes of full atmosphere, Alex mused. Not much, but symbolic, Serafina interrupted. Sometimes, symbols matter more than duration. She addressed the crowd, her voice carrying despite the thin air. I am Empress Serafina Illith of the Aurelian Empire. Our atmospheric processors provide 40% of this station's breathing gases. That air was given freely, not to be hoarded or rationed, but to sustain life. All life. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Someone called out, "Tell that to Heliarch! They charge us for breathing what you gave for free." Then, perhaps it's time Heliarch heard from those who actually breathed their product. Serafina replied. She turned to Alex. Mr. Carter, would you demonstrate what happens when maintenance protocols override profit algorithms? Alex grinned. Already working. Gladly, Your Majesty. Though I should warn you, I might accidentally trigger maintenance cycles throughout the entire sector. These old systems are so interconnected. You know, hard to isolate just one area. How unfortunate, Serafina said with a perfectly straight face. I suppose we'll have to inspect each affected area personally, for diplomatic documentation purposes. Within minutes, Alex had the maintenance cycle initiated. The effect was immediate. Recyclers hummed to life at full capacity. Ventilation systems kicked into high gear, and the stale air began to move. Throughout the sector, similar systems activated in cascade, following maintenance protocols that predated Heliarch's takeover. The crowd's reaction was even more immediate. Children who'd been listless suddenly perked up. Workers straightened, taking deep breaths for the first time in days. An elderly man near the back began to cry, his tears carrying equal parts relief and rage. 20 minutes, someone said. 20 minutes of breathing like human beings. Nika Patel appeared at Alex's elbow, her recorder capturing everything. Mr. Carter, would you care to explain how a routine maintenance cycle differs from standard operations? Alex looked directly at her recorder. Standard operations optimize for cost. Maintenance cycles optimize for life. The fact that there's a difference tells you everything about Heliarch's priorities. Strong words from someone in a Heliarch-managed sector, Nika observed. Aren't you concerned about retaliation? I'm concerned about children developing chronic hypoxia, Alex shot back. I'm concerned about workers making fatal errors because their brains aren't getting enough oxygen. I'm concerned that we've normalized suffocation as a business model. Serafina's tail tightened around his wrist support. He realized, not warning. The Aurelian Empire stands with Mr. Carter's concerns. We provide atmosphere to sustain life, not to generate profit margins. Any system that treats breath as a commodity has forgotten the fundamental purpose of civilization. Your Majesty, Rosa stepped forward, emboldened by the flowing air. There's something else you should see. The processing stations, the ones that handle your atmospheric contributions. Heliarch's been modifying them. Alex felt his blood chill. Modifying how? Adding filtration layers, extraction systems. They claim it's for purity control, but... Rosa hesitated, glancing around nervously. Some of us think they're skimming, pulling out trace elements, rare gases, selling them off-market while delivering diluted atmosphere to the districts. That's a serious accusation, one of Serafina's guards said. Can you prove it? I can, Alex said quietly. All eyes turned to him. I've been tracking anomalies in the atmospheric composition for months. Couldn't figure out why the ratios were off. If they're extracting trace elements. He pulled up data on his panel, calculations running in his head. Xenon. They're pulling xenon from the mix. It's inert, doesn't affect breathing, but it's valuable for industrial processes. So they steal from our gift, Serafina said, her voice carrying harmonics that spoke of deep anger. Then charge these people for breathing the diminished remainder. Your Majesty, another guard spoke urgently. If this is true, It violates every treaty between Aurelia and the Trade Confederation. This could be grounds for war. Seraphina cut him off. No, war would hurt these people more than Heliarch. We need a different approach. She looked at Alex. These processing stations, can we inspect them? Officially not without Heliarch approval, which we won't get. Alex smiled grimly. Unofficially, I know every maintenance tunnel in the station. And as your Majesty's tethered guardian, where you go? I go, Seraphina finished. Then lead the way, Mr. Carter. Let's see what Heliarch doesn't want us to see. They left the community center as the maintenance cycle ended, air returning to its thin baseline. The crowd dispersed slowly, but Alex caught the looks they exchanged, hope mixed with fear, anticipation tempered by experience. 20 minutes of free breathing had reminded them what they were missing. The question was whether it would inspire action or deeper despair. The maintenance tunnels were Alex's domain, a three-dimensional maze of pipes, conduits, and crawlways that existed between the station's official spaces. Here, Seraphina's regal bearing faced its first real challenge. The passages were designed for human maintenance workers, not 7-foot alien royalty with elaborate robes and sensitive tails. Perhaps, one of her guards suggested, after the third time, Seraphina had to duck. We should return with proper equipment. No, she said firmly, gathering her robes to squeeze through another junction. If Mr. Carter navigates these passages daily to maintain our life support, I can manage them once to understand what he protects. Alex found himself oddly touched by her determination. He'd expected complaints, demands for accommodation. Instead, she adapted with surprising grace, even when it meant crawling through sections where her tail had to coil completely around his arm to avoid snagging on protruding pipes. You're taking this better than most inspectors, he commented, as they paused at a maintenance junction. I told you I rule an empire of atmospheric processors. I've crawled through worse to understand how our systems work. She studied the maze of pipes surrounding them. Though I admit, our tunnels have better lighting. Budget cuts, Alex said automatically, then stopped. Wait, you personally inspect your atmospheric processors. How else would I understand what I rule? She seemed genuinely puzzled by the question. My mother took me through our first processor when I was barely past hatching. You cannot lead what you do not understand, she said. And you cannot understand from a throne. They reached the processing station after another 20 minutes of navigation. Through a maintenance viewport, they could see the massive chambers where Aurelian atmosphere mixed with the station's recycled air. The setup should have been simple: input, mixing, output. Instead, Alex counted at least 15 additional stages that hadn't been there during his last official inspection. There, he pointed to a series of extraction columns. Those aren't in any schematic I've seen. And look at the flow rates, they're pulling something out before the mix enters general circulation. Seraphina's guard produced a scanner, running it over the viewport. Confirmed. Xenon extraction at 17% efficiency. They're taking nearly a fifth of the xenon content. That's millions in credits annually. Alex calculated. Xenon's crucial for ion drives, certain manufacturing processes, and it's completely invisible to standard breathing metrics. ARA 3, Alex called to his AI assistant through his earpiece. Can you access the extraction logs from here? The AI's synthesized voice crackled through the maintenance tunnel's interference. Attempting access. Warning. This system is protected by Heliarch security protocols. Unauthorized access may trigger... Alarms began wailing through the station. Not the sharp pitch of decompression, but the authoritative blare of security alerts. I believe we've been noticed, Seraphina observed with remarkable calm. This way, Alex urged, leading them through a different route. We need to get back to public areas before... The tunnel ahead flooded with light as security forces established positions. Behind them, more lights appeared. They were trapped in the maintenance section, 30 meters from any official corridor. Empress Seraphina. Director Thorne's voice echoed through the tunnel speakers. Please remain where you are. Security teams are en route to escort you to safety. It appears you've accidentally wandered into restricted areas. Accidentally, Alex muttered. Right. Seraphina straightened as much as the tunnel allowed. Director Thorne, how thoughtful, though I wonder why atmospheric processing systems require such heavy security. Unless there's something you'd prefer we didn't see. Your Majesty's safety is paramount, Thorne replied smoothly. These tunnels aren't designed for diplomatic visits. Please, allow my teams to escort you to proper facilities where we can discuss any concerns you might have. Alex felt Seraphina's tail pulse around his wrist, a signal he was beginning to understand. He pulled up his maintenance panel, fingers flying over commands he'd never used in combination before. What are you doing? She asked quietly. Evening the odds, Alex replied. These tunnels aren't just for maintenance. They're also for emergency response. And right now, I'm declaring an emergency. He triggered the fire suppression systems throughout the sector. Not the modern foam dispensers, but the older deluge protocols. Water burst from hidden nozzles, instantly turning the tunnels into waterfalls. Security forces scrambled for cover as their equipment shorted out, visibility dropping to zero. Run, Alex said, grabbing Seraphina's hand, the one not attached by tail, and pulling her through passages he could navigate blind. They burst into a public corridor just as soaked security forces emerged from other access points. The sight of the Empress of Aurelia, drenched and muddy, being pursued by Heliarch security through a crowded marketplace, became instantly viral. Dozens of personal recorders captured the scene as Alex and Seraphina, still connected by her tail, ran through the district. Stop. A security officer called. By order of Heliarch Corporation, you are under arrest for trespassing in restricted areas. That proved to be a mistake. The crowd, still riding the high of 20 minutes of free breath, closed ranks. They didn't attack. That would have brought heavier response. Instead, they simply stood in the way, a living barrier of bodies that forced security to slow, to push, to negotiate passage. This way. Rosa appeared at Alex's side, guiding them through a service entrance into what had once been a shopping complex. Nika's set up in the old food court. Says she's got something you need to see. They found the journalists surrounded by screens, data streams flowing faster than Alex could track. She looked up as they entered, taking in their sodden appearance with raised eyebrows. Swimming, Your Majesty. Inspecting, Seraphina corrected, wringing water from her robes with as much dignity as possible. We discovered xenon extraction systems attached to the atmospheric processors. Heliarch is stealing from our contributions. That's just the beginning, Nika said, turning her screens toward them. After your little demonstration earlier, some interesting people reached out to me. Former Heliarch employees, technical staff who quit or were fired for asking too many questions. Look at this. The display showed technical schematics, financial records, communication logs. Alex leaned in, his engineer's mind parsing the data rapidly. They're not just managing the existing system, he breathed. They're preparing for total control. Look, new processing stations in development, designed to work only with their proprietary algorithms. If these go online, they could cut off any atmospheric supplier who doesn't play by their rules. Nika finished. Including the Aurelian Empire. They're setting up a monopoly on breathing itself. Seraphina's guards looked ready for war, but she remained focused on the data. When the summit, Alex realized. They're going to propose this at tomorrow's summit as the next evolution of the oxygen credit system. Complete vertical integration of atmospheric resources. And if anyone objects, Nika added, well, mysterious malfunctions do happen, as Your Majesty experienced firsthand. Seraphina was quiet for a long moment. Her tail coiled so tightly around Alex's wrist that he could feel her pulse through it, rapid but controlled. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of decision. Then, we need to ensure the summit hears more than Heliarch's proposal. Mr. Carter, can you document everything? The xenon extraction, the planned monopolization, all of it. Already working on it, Alex assured her, his fingers flying over his interface. But documentation isn't enough. Thorne will have lawyers, lobbyists, bought votes. We need... The lights flickered. Then the air stopped moving. For a moment, Alex thought it was another malfunction. Then his atmospheric readings started flashing warnings. Not just in their sector, across the entire district. Oxygen levels dropping, recyclers shutting down, ventilation systems going offline. No, Rosa whispered, checking her own equipment. They wouldn't. There are thousands of people. Emergency protocols. Thorne's voice echoed through the station-wide communication system. Due to security breaches in atmospheric processing facilities, Heliarch Corporation is implementing containment measures. Oxygen will be restored to standard levels once security sweeps are complete. Estimated time, 6 hours. 6 hours at these levels. Alex did the math, his stomach dropping. Children won't make it. The elderly, the sick. It's collective punishment, one of Serafina's guards snarled. Punishing the entire district for protecting you. For protecting truth, Serafina corrected, but her harmonics carried fury. Mr. Carter, those manual overrides you mentioned, can they counteract this? Alex was already pulling up schematics. Maybe, but I'd need to physically access at least 3 junction points. And with security lockdown. He stopped, an idea forming. Unless the old emergency systems? Before Heliarch, before corporate management, the station had emergency protocols for exactly this scenario. They're hardwired, can't be overridden remotely, but activating them would require someone at the original control center, Nika guessed, which is in the station's core, past every security checkpoint Heliarch has. Not every checkpoint, Alex said slowly. There's one route they might not know about. It was sealed after the renovations, but the passages should still be there. Should be, Serafina asked. Probably are. Maybe. It's been 15 years since anyone tried. Serafina stood, pulling Alex up with her. Then we try now. Guards, coordinate with Rosa's people. Start moving the vulnerable to areas with better circulation. Buy us time. Your Majesty, the lead guard protested. I cannot allow you to risk. You cannot allow people to suffocate while I hide in safety. Serafina cut him off. The tethering chose Mr. Carter as my guardian. Perhaps it knew I would need someone who guards not just my life, but the lives air makes possible. As they prepared to venture into passages that might, or might not exist, racing against time and dropping oxygen levels, Alex found himself studying the alien Empress attached to his wrist. Wet, muddy, her royal robes ruined. She somehow looked more regal than she had in all her finery. What? She asked, catching his gaze. Just thinking, Alex said, that your mother was right. You can't understand from a throne. No, Serafina agreed, her tail pulsing with what he now recognized as determination. But you can act from anywhere, if you remember what you're acting for. The oxygen readings continued to drop. Somewhere in the district, children were already struggling. They had perhaps an hour before serious casualties began. Time to find out if 15-year-old maintenance passages could save thousands of lives. The sealed passage was worse than Alex remembered. 15 years of neglect had turned what was once a service corridor into an obstacle course of corroded panels, burst coolant lines, and gravity plates that flickered between full Earth standard and 0G without warning. Each fluctuation sent Alex and Serafina stumbling, their forced connection making every movement a negotiation. Perhaps, Serafina gasped as they hit the ceiling for the 3rd time in as many minutes. we should discuss the architectural choices of your predecessors. Budget engineering, Alex managed, using his magnetic boots to anchor them to what he hoped was the floor. This section was built by the lowest bidder using recycled components. It was supposed to be temporary. Nothing is more permanent than a temporary solution, Serafina observed, her tail tightening as another gravity fluctuation sent them sideways. How much further? Alex checked his position against mental maps that were decade and a half out of date. Maybe 200 meters. If the passage hasn't collapsed, and if the emergency control room still exists, and if... Mr. Carter, Serafina interrupted, perhaps we could focus on positive possibilities. Despite everything, Alex found himself smiling. Right. Positive thinking. We're definitely going to make it through this definitely stable passage to the definitely functional control room. Your sarcasm is noted but unhelpful, she said, though her harmonics carried amusement. Tell me about these emergency systems. Why weren't they integrated into Heliarch's network? Politics and paranoia, Alex explained, as they navigated around a section where the walls had buckled inward. The original station builders were refugees from the corporate wars. They hardwired certain life support functions to prevent exactly what Heliarch is doing now, using air as a weapon. The systems are completely analog, mechanical switches that can't be hacked or overridden remotely. Wise predecessors. So why were they abandoned? Because they're inefficient. They flood the entire station with maximum atmosphere. No zones, no optimization. Heliarch convinced the administration that targeted delivery was more cost-effective. Alex helped Serafina squeeze through a particularly narrow section. They were right, from a purely economic standpoint. You save 30% on processing costs when you can reduce flow to unused areas. Unused areas like where the poor live? Exactly. Alex's voice carried years of accumulated bitterness. Amazing how algorithms always seem to find poverty inefficient. They reached a junction where 3 passages met. 2 were completely blocked by debris. The third glowed with an ominous red light that Alex's radiation detector immediately started screaming about. That's not good, he muttered, checking the readings. Coolant leak from the old reactor systems. Not immediately lethal, but a cumulative exposure would be unwise. Serafina finished. How long to get through? At a run, maybe 90 seconds. But with the gravity fluctuations and our situation, he gestured to where her tail bound them together. Then we adapt. Serafina closed her eyes, and Alex felt something change in the coil around his wrist. The pressure remained, but it became more flexible, allowing greater range of movement. A technique we use for hunting in difficult terrain. I can maintain the bond while permitting limited separation. How limited? Perhaps 2 meters. Enough to navigate obstacles independently if we coordinate. Alex studied the passage ahead, mapping the route in his mind. Okay, we go fast. We stay low to avoid the worst of the radiation, and we don't stop. Ready. Mr. Carter, Serafina said, and for a moment her regal mask slipped, showing the young woman underneath who was trusting him with her life. I was ready the moment I saw those oxygen readings. People are suffocating while we hesitate. They ran. The passage fought them every step, gravity shifting wildly, radiation making their skin prickle, debris creating an obstacle course that would have been challenging even without being tethered together. But they moved with growing synchronization, Serafina's natural grace complementing Alex's practiced navigation. When she stumbled, he caught her. When he misjudged a gravity shift, her tail kept him anchored. They burst through the far end, gasping, radiation alarms screaming. Alex immediately pulled out emergency rad purge tablets, pressing one into Serafina's hand. Chew. Don't swallow, he instructed. Tastes terrible, but it'll neutralize the worst of it. She followed his lead, her face contorting at the flavor. Your people have interesting ideas about medicine. Wait until you try the emergency rations, Alex said, already moving toward their destination. Assuming we live that long. The emergency control room, when they finally reached it, was a monument to forgotten paranoia. Massive mechanical switches lined the walls, each labeled with sections of the station. No screens, no digital interfaces, just pure analog control that couldn't be compromised by any hack or algorithm. "It's beautiful," Serafina breathed, running her fingers over the pristine switches. "Elegant in its simplicity." "And locked," Alex added, pointing to the massive mechanical seal over the main controls. "Of course it's locked. Why would anything be easy?" He examined the mechanism, his engineer's mind parsing the design. It was brilliant. Really, a purely mechanical lock that required specific actions in sequence. Impossible to pick or bypass. "There should be a key," he muttered, searching through nearby compartments. "The station chief would have had..." He pulled out a metal box, corroded but intact. Inside, instead of a key, was a note. "If you're reading this," Alex read aloud, "then the Corps have finally gone too far. The key isn't a thing, it's knowledge. The builders were refugees. Remember, what matters most to someone who's lost everything? Switch sequence family section A, shelter section C, purpose section G, hope section D. In that order. Remember us." Alex stared at the note, throat tight. The original builders had seen this coming, had prepared for it, and trusted that someone would understand when the time came. "Family, shelter, purpose, hope," Serafina repeated softly. "They built their philosophy into their failsafes." "Yeah." Alex moved to the switches, following the sequence. Each massive lever required both hands to move, mechanical resistances providing tactile feedback. They were idealists, believed that survival meant more than just breathing. Were they wrong? Alex pulled the final switch, and the seal disengaged with a satisfying mechanical thunk. "Ask me after we save the outer districts." The main control panel was a work of art, hundreds of switches, each controlling atmospheric flow to different sections. But the master controls were clearly marked: emergency atmospheric distribution. All sections, maximum flow. "This will override everything?" Serafina asked. "Everything Heliarch has done in the past hour. Yes. But..." Alex hesitated, hand on the main switch. "This will also trigger every alarm in the station. Heliarch will know exactly where we are. Security will converge on this location. Then we'd better make it count." Serafina placed her hand over his on the switch. Together. Together, they pulled. The effect was immediate and station-wide. Ancient pumps roared to life. Backup systems that had slumbered for decades, suddenly remembering their purpose. Throughout Helios Station, emergency vents opened, flooding every corridor, every room, every forgotten corner with atmosphere. In the outer districts, Alex could imagine the scene: children gasping in suddenly plentiful air, workers straightening as oxygen flooded their lungs, the elderly breathing freely for the first time in years. The mechanical systems didn't care about credit ratings or residential zones. They simply did what they were built to do: keep people alive. Alarms shrieked through the station, but these were different from Heliarch's authoritative commands. These were older, more primal, the station itself, announcing that emergency protocols were active, that survival trumped profit. "We did it," Alex breathed, watching the mechanical gauges show full atmospheric pressure across all sections. "We started it," Serafina corrected. "Now comes the difficult part." As if summoned by her words, explosions echoed through the passages behind them. Security forces, using breaching charges to fast-track their approach. "Can they shut this down remotely?" Serafina asked. "No, that's the beauty of it. They'd have to physically come here and reverse the process. But they can shut down the pumps at the source, start isolating sections. We've bought time, not victory." "Then we should leave before..." The door exploded inward. Security forces poured through, weapons raised. tactical gear making them look more like soldiers than corporate security. But they hesitated, seeing the Empress of Aurelia standing calmly by the controls. "Your Majesty," the lead officer said through his helmet speaker, "Director Thorne requests your immediate presence. He's concerned about your safety." "How thoughtful," Serafina replied. "Though I notice his concern didn't extend to the thousands who were suffocating." "Emergency protocols, Your Majesty. Necessary for station security?" "Whose security?" Alex demanded. "The children in Section C who were turning blue. The elderly in Section F who—" "Mr. Carter," the officer interrupted. "You're under arrest for sabotage, theft of corporate resources, and violation of atmospheric management protocols." "Atmospheric management protocols," Alex repeated. "Is that what we're calling attempted mass murder now?" "Mr. Carter speaks with my voice," Serafina stated, her tail tightening around his wrist. "To arrest him is to arrest me." The officer's helmet turned slightly, probably receiving instructions. "Director Thorne anticipated you might say that. He's prepared to discuss accommodations. But this discussion needs to happen in civilized surroundings, not in maintenance tunnels." "Civilized," Serafina mused. "Yes, I suppose suffocating the poor is very civilized. Very efficient." She looked at Alex. "What do you think, Mr. Carter? Should we accept Director Thorne's civilized invitation?" Alex weighed their options. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and the emergency systems were already running. Whatever happened next would happen in boardrooms and council chambers, not maintenance tunnels. "We've done what we came to do," he said finally. "Let's hear what Thorne has to say." The journey back through the station was surreal. They traveled in a security convoy, but throughout the corridors, people had emerged to witness their passage. Word had spread the Empress, who crawled through tunnels to save them. The engineer, who remembered the old ways. Some called out thanks. Others simply watched, breathing deeply of air that flowed freely for the first time in memory. Thorne waited in Heliarch's executive suite, a space that seemed to exist in a different reality from the outer districts. Here, air was perfumed, gravity was perfectly calibrated, and every surface gleamed with expensive perfection. "Your Majesty," Thorne said smoothly, rising from behind a desk that probably cost more than a district's annual air budget. "I apologize for the misunderstanding. Emergency protocols can sometimes seem harsh, but they're necessary for maintaining order." "Order," Serafina repeated. "Is that what you call it when children suffocate?" "I call it unfortunate, but necessary." Thorne's expression remained placid. "The security breach in our atmospheric processing systems required immediate containment. Thanks to Mr. Carter's unauthorized access, we couldn't be certain the air supply hadn't been compromised." "The only compromise I found," Alex interjected, "was Heliarch stealing xenon from Aurelian contributions." "Extracting valuable components from donated resources is standard practice, clearly outlined in subsection 47C of our management agreement." Thorne touched a control, bringing up holographic documents. "All perfectly legal." "Legal isn't the same as right," Serafina said. "No, but it's what matters in council chambers and trade negotiations." Thorne leaned back, studying them. "Which brings us to tomorrow's summit. Your little adventure today has created complications. Some might interpret your actions as Aurelian interference in station management. Some might interpret your actions as crimes against humanity," Alex shot back. "Humanity." Thorne's smile was thin. "Such a flexible concept. Does it include the modified humans who require less oxygen? The refugees who contribute less to station economy? Where do we draw the line?" "We don't," Serafina said simply. "That's the point. Air is for everyone, or it's for no one." "Admirable philosophy. Terrible business model." Thorne stood, moving to the window that overlooked the station. "Do you know what keeps Helios Station running? Your Majesty, not idealism, not philosophy. Credits. resources, efficiency. Without Heliarch's management, this station would have failed years ago. Without Heliarch's management, Alex said, people could breathe without checking their credit balance first. And the station would be bankrupt within a year. Thorne turned back to them. But I'm not here to debate philosophy. I'm here to offer a solution. Your Majesty, you want better conditions for the outer districts. I need the summit to proceed without further disruptions. I'm prepared to make concessions. What kind of concessions? Serafina asked. Increased atmospheric allowances for families with children, extended grace periods for payment defaults, even a pilot program for your Oxygen Commons concept limited to one district, naturally, to test viability. Crumbs, Alex said flatly. You're offering crumbs while keeping the whole loaf. I'm offering reality, Thorne countered. Change happens incrementally. Mr. Carter, push too hard, too fast, and the system breaks. Then everyone suffocates, not just the economically disadvantaged. Serafina was quiet for a long moment, her tail pulsing rhythmically around Alex's wrist. He could feel her thinking, weighing options, calculating possibilities. Your offer is noted, she said finally. We'll consider it. Consider quickly, Thorne advised. The summit begins in 12 hours. After that, positions harden, votes are counted, and change becomes much more difficult. As they left Heliarch's executive suite, returning to the Aurelian delegation's quarters, Alex felt the weight of what they'd accomplished and what they hadn't. The emergency systems were running, but for how long they'd exposed Heliarch's theft. But would it matter if the summit legitimized the whole system? You're thinking too loudly, Serafina observed as they walked. Sorry, it's just... Alex struggled to articulate his frustration. We saved lives today, but tomorrow, Heliarch will find ways to make those lives miserable again. Legal ways, voted on by councils and approved by committees. Yes, Serafina agreed. Which is why we need to change the conversation entirely. Meaning, she smiled. And it was the smile of someone who'd grown up playing political games at galactic scale. Director Thorne thinks tomorrow is about votes and agreements. But summits aren't really about what happens in council chambers. They're about what happens in the corridors, in private meetings, in the stories people tell afterward. You have a plan. I have an idea. But first, I need you to tell me something. She stopped walking, turning to face him fully. This algorithm, the one that controls the oxygen credit system, could you improve it? Improve it, I could gut it and rebuild it from scratch. Make it actually serve people instead of profits. But Heliarch owns the code, owns the patents. What if they didn't? What if the code was already out there, in a form they couldn't claim? Alex's eyes widened as he understood. The emergency systems. They're not digital, but the principles. I could reverse engineer a digital version based on the mechanical logic. Open source it. Make it available to everyone before the summit even starts. And if every station, every colony, every habitat suddenly had access to a free, efficient, life-first atmospheric management system, Heliarch's monopoly becomes worthless overnight. Alex grinned. You're talking about economic warfare. I'm talking about liberation through technology, Serafina corrected. The same gift Aurelia gives with our atmosphere freely, to all who need it. It'll take all night. I'll need help. Nika's contacts, Rosa's team, everyone we can trust with code. Then we'd better begin. Serafina's tail squeezed gently. I believe your people have a saying, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now, Alex finished. Your Majesty, has anyone ever told you that you're terrifyingly clever? Frequently, but rarely as a compliment. Her expression grew serious. We're about to make powerful enemies. Mr. Carter, are you prepared for that? Alex thought about the children in the outer districts, the workers choosing between food and air, the elderly dying quietly, so their families could have a few more credits of oxygen. I've been preparing for this my whole life. I just didn't know it until today. As they returned to work, Serafina coordinating with other delegations, while Alex dove into code, neither noticed the small surveillance drone that had followed them from Thorne's office. In his executive suite, the director watched their conversation with interest. "Fascinating," he murmured to himself. "They actually think they can change the system with idealism and open source code." He touched a control, sending encrypted messages to key summit delegates. Time to remind them that the House always wins, especially when the House controls the air supply. But in the Aurelian quarters, surrounded by volunteers and rebels and people who just wanted to breathe freely, Alex and Serafina worked through the night. Every line of code was a small revolution. Every function was a declaration that air belonged to everyone. The summit would begin in 10 hours. The real battle for the future of breathing was about to begin. The code was beautiful in its simplicity. Line by line, function by function, Alex and his makeshift team of rebels built something that would have taken Heliarch's engineers months to create. The difference was motivation. They weren't coding for profit margins, but for the next breath their children would take. "This distribution algorithm," Rosa said, leaning over Alex's shoulder at 3 a.m. "It's elegant. No credit checks, no zone restrictions, just pure need-based allocation. Based on the mechanical logic of the emergency systems," Alex explained, his fingers never stopping their dance across the holographic interface. "Those old refugees knew what they were doing. Every person gets baseline survival atmosphere first. Only after everyone can breathe do you optimize for anything else." Across the room, Serafina worked with equal intensity, her tail still maintaining its grip on Alex's wrist as she coordinated with delegates from a dozen worlds. The forced proximity had evolved from awkward to natural over the past day. They moved like dancers who'd rehearsed for years, anticipating each other's needs without words. "The Meridian Collective is interested," she announced, closing another communication channel. "Their ambassador says they've been looking for alternatives to Heliarch's stranglehold on their mining stations. That's 7 systems so far," Nika noted, updating her running tally. "If we can get to 10 before the summit." Alarms erupted across the station. Not the sharp pitch of decompression or the authoritative blare of security alerts, but something far more ominous, the deep, resonant tone that meant external danger. "Solar storm," Alex breathed, checking his readings. "Category 5. Where the hell did that come from?" ARA-3's voice crackled through the speakers. "Stellar monitoring stations report unusual solar activity escalating rapidly. Estimated time until radiation wave impact 47 minutes. "The storm shelters," Rosa said, already pulling up station schematics. "Do we have enough capacity?" Alex ran the numbers, his heart sinking. "For the inner districts, yes. But the outer sections..." He trailed off, seeing the same realization dawn on everyone's faces. The storm shelters, like everything else on Helios Station, were distributed based on economic value. The outer districts, where the poor lived, had minimal protection. "How convenient," Serafina said, her harmonics carrying bitter understanding. "A natural disaster arrives just hours before the summit, requiring everyone to shelter in place. No demonstrations, no public pressure, just delegates making decisions while thousands huddle in inadequate shelters." "You think Thorne arranged a solar storm?" Alex asked. "I think Director Thorne is remarkably adept at turning circumstances to his advantage," she replied. "Whether or not he caused this, he'll certainly use it." Another alert flashed across Alex's screen, this one from the atmospheric systems. "Oh no! 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 No!" His fingers flew over the controls, checking and rechecking the data. "The emergency systems we activated, they're not shielded against radiation of this magnitude. When that wave hits..." "They'll fail," Rosa finished. "Every mechanical pump, Every analog controller. Decades-old components weren't built for Category 5 storms. So we'll be back to Heliarch systems, Nika said slowly. The only ones with modern shielding. They'll control every breath during the summit while painting themselves as saviors. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Their victory with the emergency systems would last less than an hour. Their open-source code was almost complete, but meaningless if no one could breathe to implement it. And the summit would proceed with Heliarch, holding literally every life on the station hostage. Unless, Alex said suddenly, an idea forming, we shield them ourselves. Shield, century-old mechanical systems spread across the entire station in 45 minutes. Rosa shook her head. Alex, I love your optimism, but that's impossible. Not the systems, Alex clarified, pulling up new schematics. The control signals. The mechanical switches we threw, they're just triggers. The actual commands travel through the station's neural network to reach the pumps. If we can create a buffer layer, a kind of atmospheric firewall. You want to hack the station's nervous system, Serafina said, understanding dawning. With help. Alex turned to ARA-3's interface. What's your processing power limitation for real-time system modification? Considerable, but not insurmountable, the AI replied. However, such modification would require authorization from the highest-ranking official present during an emergency. Serafina interrupted. Which would be me. Authorization granted. Your Majesty, one of her guards protested. Allowing an AI unrestricted access to station systems violates numerous treaties. Treaties that assume normal circumstances. Serafina cut him off. Nothing about our current situation is normal. Mr. Carter, what do you need? Alex was already deep in planning mode. The engineer in him singing at the challenge. Physical access to 3 neural network nodes. The coding team to finish the open source system. And about 30 volunteers who don't mind radiation exposure. The exposure will be lethal, Rosa said quietly. Not if we rotate teams. 2 minutes per person. Max. We can keep it below critical levels. Alex looked around the room, at faces that had become family over the past night. I won't order anyone. But if we don't try... I'll go, Rosa said immediately. And me, echoed from a dozen throats. Nika raised her recorder. I'm documenting everything. The galaxy needs to see what Heliarch's efficiency really costs. Then we'd better move, Serafina said, rising and pulling Alex with her. 39 minutes until impact. What followed was organized chaos of the highest order. Teams scattered across the station, racing to reach neural nodes before radiation made movement impossible. Alex and Serafina took the most dangerous route directly through the station's core, where the primary node resided. The core was a marvel of engineering that Alex had only seen in schematics. A hollow sphere 50 meters across, filled with the pulsing bioneural fibers that carried every command, every bit of data that kept Helios Station alive. It was also, he realized, completely unshielded. They never expected anyone to be here during a storm, he said, already pulling out his tools. 2 minutes. Then we switch. I can give you 3, Serafina said. Aurelian physiology is more radiation resistant. 2, Alex insisted, meeting her eyes. We do this as equals or not at all. She nodded, and something passed between them, understanding deeper than words. They'd moved beyond Empress and Engineer, beyond Tethered and Guardian. They were partners, plain and simple. Alex dove into the work, hands steady, despite the knowledge that each second brought more radiation streaming through his cells. The modifications were delicate, teaching the station's nervous system to protect certain signals while allowing others through. Like performing surgery while the patient ran a marathon. Time, Serafina called, already pulling him back. They switched positions, Serafina taking over with surprising skill. You forget, she said at his look. I grew up maintaining atmospheric processors. Different scale, same principles. Back and forth they went. Precious minutes ticking away as radiation levels climbed. Alex could feel it now, a tingling in his skin, a metallic taste in his mouth. His rad counter had long since maxed out its warnings. "Almost there," he gasped during his fourth turn. "Just need to—" The lights went out. Emergency power kicked in a second later, bathing everything in red. But Alex knew what it meant. The storm's electromagnetic leading edge had arrived. "How long until the main radiation wave?" Serafina asked. 10 minutes, maybe less. Alex's hands moved faster. No longer careful, just desperate. "Got it, ARA-3, initialize the buffer protocol now." "Initializing," the AI responded. "Warning, multiple system conflicts detected. Heliarch security protocols are attempting to—" "Override them all," Alex commanded. "Emergency authorization from both of us." "Confirmed. Overriding. Buffer protocol active. Storm shelter protocols engaged." They ran. No grace now, no dignity. Just a mad scramble through corridors as radiation alarms screamed ever louder. Alex's legs felt like lead, his lungs burning with each breath. Beside him, Serafina stumbled, her usual fluid movement faltering. "The tail," she gasped. "If I release it, you can move faster." "We go together," Alex said firmly, catching her as she swayed. "That's what partners do." They made it to the shelter with seconds to spare, tumbling through the heavy doors just as the main radiation wave struck. The lights flickered, went out, came back. Throughout the station, Alex could hear the groaning of stressed systems, the whine of overloaded circuits. But underneath it all, steady as a heartbeat, came the sound of pumps. Still running, still pushing air to every corner of the station. "We did it," someone whispered. "The buffer held," Rosa confirmed, checking her instruments. "The emergency systems are still online. Radiation's bouncing right off the neural shielding." Alex wanted to celebrate, but the room was spinning. He looked down at his rad counter and winced at the numbers. "Need to get to medical—" "Already here," a voice said. "Doctor—" Sarah Chen emerged from the crowd, already preparing rad purge treatments. "Honestly, Carter, 20 years I've been patching you up after your stunts. This one takes the prize." As medical staff swarmed them, pumping them full of treatments that would hopefully prevent the worst effects, Alex found himself watching Serafina, even radiation-sick and exhausted. She maintained that core of dignity that made her who she was. "You're staring," she noted, not opening her eyes. "Thinking," Alex corrected, "about what happens next. The summit's in 3 hours. Thorne will have plans, contingencies." "Let him plan," Serafina said. "We have something better." "What's that?" "Truth. And people willing to suffer for it." She opened her eyes, those impossible color-shifting irises finding his. "Do you know what I've learned in the past day?" Alex Carter. The use of his first name alone made him pay attention. "What's that?" "That leadership isn't about being above people. It's about being willing to breathe the same air, face the same dangers, bleed the same blood." Her tail tightened around his wrist, not the automatic grip of the tethering, but something deliberate, chosen. "My mother taught me to understand what I ruled. You taught me to fight for it." Before Alex could respond, Nika burst in, her recorder still running. "You need to see this." While we were saving the mechanical systems, Thorne made his move. She projected her screen for everyone to see. A perfectly produced video showed Director Thorne in his pristine suit, standing before a backdrop of storm-locked stars. Citizens of Helios Station," his recorded image said. "I speak to you during this crisis to offer reassurance. While extremist elements have tampered with our life support systems, endangering thousands, Heliarch Corporation stands ready to ensure your survival. Our shielded atmospheric processors continue to function perfectly, protecting you from both radiation and the failures of obsolete technology. This is why professional management matters. This is why the oxygen credit system saves lives. He's painting us as terrorists, Rosa snarled. Worse, Nika continued. He's pushed the summit forward. Says that given the security situation, delegates will meet in 1 hour via secured hololink. No public galleries, no outside observers, just delegates and their recorded votes. Can he do that? Someone asked. Emergency protocols, Alex said bitterly. Of course he can. And with everyone sheltering from radiation, who's going to protest? We are, Serafina said, standing despite Dr. Chen's protests. The radiation will peak in the next hour, then decline. By the time the summit actually starts, it'll be safe enough for shielded movement. We're going. Your Majesty, her guard commander stepped forward. The security risks are acceptable, Serafina finished. I won't cower in a shelter while the future of breathing is decided in back rooms. Mr. Carter, is our code ready? Alex checked his interface. The team says 15 more minutes for final debugging. Then we have 15 minutes to decide how to present it. Serafina looked around the shelter, seeing not just her team, but families from the outer districts, workers who'd risked everything to help them, children who deserved to breathe freely. This isn't about replacing one system with another anymore. It's about proving that ordinary people can build extraordinary solutions when they work together. The summit won't care about philosophy, Alex warned. They'll care about economics, efficiency, profit margins. Then we'll speak their language, Serafina said. But we'll make them hear ours too. As radiation levels dropped and the storm passed, teams prepared for what everyone knew was the final confrontation. Not a battle of weapons, but of ideas, fought in committee rooms and broadcast across the galaxy. Alex ran final checks on the open source code, marveling at what they'd accomplished. It wasn't just software. It was a declaration of independence from anyone who would put a price on breath. You know, he said to Serafina as they prepared to leave the shelter, when I grabbed your tail yesterday, I never imagined it would lead to this. When you grabbed my tail, she replied, you saved more than just my life. You saved me from being the kind of ruler who watches from above while people suffocate below. She paused at the shelter door, looking back at him. Whatever happens in that summit, we've already won something important. What's that? We've proven that a human engineer and an alien Empress can work together to keep children breathing. If we can do that, imagine what else is possible. The doors opened to reveal a station transformed by crisis. Emergency lighting cast everything in red shadows. Radiation warnings still flickered on every screen. But in the corridors, people emerged from shelters with a different kind of light in their eyes. They'd seen what cooperation could accomplish. They'd breathed free air while corporations scrambled to reassert control. Ready, Serafina asked. Alex checked his rad counter one more time, then looked at the woman whose tale bound them together in ways neither could have predicted. Ready. Together, they walked toward the summit chambers, toward Director Thorne and his perfectly laid plans, toward a future where breath might finally be free. Behind them, Nika raised her recorder, capturing every step. This is Nika Patel, reporting from Helios Station. The summit that will decide the future of breathing is about to begin. But the real story isn't in the chamber. It's in the corridors, where an Empress and an engineer just proved that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to let people suffocate. The final battle for air was about to begin. The summit chamber had been transformed into a fortress of corporate efficiency. Holographic delegates flickered in carefully arranged tiers, their images crystal clear, despite the lingering electromagnetic interference from the storm. Director Thorne stood at the center podium, his silver implants gleaming as data streams flowed across his augmented vision. Esteemed delegates, Thorne began, his voice carrying the perfect blend of authority and concern. We gather under extraordinary circumstances. The recent terrorist attacks on our life support systems have demonstrated exactly Why professional management of atmospheric resources is not just preferable, it's essential. Alex felt his jaw clench as they entered the chamber. Beside him, Serafina maintained perfect composure, though her tail tightened around his wrist in what he now recognized as controlled anger. "Ah," Thorn said, noting their arrival. "Her Majesty graces us with her presence, despite the security concerns. And Mr. Carter, our enthusiastic engineer. I trust the radiation treatment was successful." "Successful enough to be here," Alex replied, not bothering to hide his contempt. "Indeed. Though perhaps your time would be better spent repairing the damage your unauthorized access caused to our systems." "You mean the damage that saved thousands from suffocating?" Serafina interjected smoothly. "How thoughtless of us." A ripple of unease passed through the holographic delegates. The Centauri ambassador leaned forward. "Your Majesty, while we appreciate the Aurelian Empire's contributions, surely you can understand the need for structured management." "I understand," Serafina said, moving to take her place among the delegates. "That in the past 36 hours, I have breathed the air of your structured management. It tastes of desperation and profit margins." "Dramatic words," Thorn countered. "But drama doesn't maintain complex systems. Perhaps we should proceed with the vote on expanding the oxygen credit system." "Actually," Alex said, stepping forward, "we have a counterproposal." Thorn's expression flickered just for a moment with something that might have been concern. "Mr. Carter, you're not a registered delegate. You have no standing to make proposals." "He speaks with my voice," Serafina stated. "As my tethered guardian, his words carry the full weight of the Aurelian Empire." "A quaint tradition," Thorn said, recovering smoothly. "But surely we can't reshape interstellar policy based on biological accidents." "Biological accidents." Serafina's harmonics carried dangerous undertones. "Is that how you view the bonds between people, Director? As accidents to be managed?" "I view them as variables to be optimized," Thorn replied. "Now, about the vote." "The counterproposal," Alex interrupted, pulling up his holographic interface. "Over the past night, a team of volunteers engineers, programmers, atmospheric technicians, and ordinary citizens created something remarkable. A complete atmospheric management system based on the principles of the old emergency protocols. Open source, free to implement, available to everyone." The chamber erupted in murmurs. Several delegates leaned forward with interest while others looked to Thorn for guidance. "Impressive," Thorn said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "Amateur code written in haste by radicals and refugees. I'm sure it's quite enthusiastic. But can it handle the complexity of real-world implementation? Can it optimize for efficiency? Can it... "It can keep people breathing," Alex cut him off. "Which seems to be something your system struggles with." "My system," Thorn said coldly, "has maintained this station for 15 years. Your code has existed for less than a day. Delegates, surely we're not seriously considering replacing proven infrastructure with untested experiments." The Meridian Collective ambassador spoke up. "We've reviewed the preliminary code structure. It's surprisingly robust. More importantly, it's transparent. Every calculation visible. Every decision traceable." "Transparency is inefficiency," Thorn countered. "Do you really want every citizen second-guessing atmospheric algorithms? Do you want politics and populism determining oxygen flow?" "As opposed to profit?" Serafina asked. "Yes, Director, we do." Alex watched the interplay, recognizing Thorn's strategy. The man was good deflecting, reframing, making prudence sound like wisdom, and compassion sound like chaos. Time to change the game. "There's something else," Alex said, pulling up a new display. "Something we discovered while documenting our code. ARA3, please display the signature analysis." The AI's voice filled the chamber. Displaying core algorithm comparison. Pattern recognition indicates significant overlap between Heliarch's proprietary oxygen credit system and atmospheric management code published under open license 18 years ago by A. Carter. The silence that followed was deafening. "That's right," Alex said, his voice steady despite the trembling in his chest. "The foundation of Heliarch's system, the code that's been putting prices on breath for 15 years, is based on work I did as a graduate student. Work I released freely because I believed atmospheric management should serve everyone." "Ancient history," Thorne said, but there was an edge to his voice now. "Code evolves. Our improvements. Your improvements added credit checks and zone restrictions to algorithms designed to maximize survival." Alex interrupted. "You took something meant to give life and turned it into a tool for controlling it. We refined crude academic work into a functioning economic model. You stole hope and sold it back as debt." The words hung in the air, raw and accusatory. Alex felt Serafina's tail pulse supportively as he continued. "I was young, idealistic. I thought making the code open source would protect it, ensure it helped everyone. Instead, Heliarch forked it, closed it, and perverted every principle it was built on." He looked directly at the assembled delegates. "But here's the thing about open source, you can't really kill it. The original code still exists, and what we've built over the past day isn't just new software. It's a return to first principles. Air for life, not profit." "This is all very touching," Thorne said, his composure cracking slightly. "But emotional appeals don't change economic reality. The oxygen credit system works because it creates accountability. It works because it holds people hostage," Serafina interjected. "But please, Director, tell us more about accountability. Tell us about the xenon extraction system stealing from donated atmosphere. Tell us about algorithms that find poverty inefficient. Tell us about children developing cognitive delays because their districts can't afford standard oxygen percentages. Necessary optimizations in a resource-limited environment. Helios Station is attached to one of the largest atmospheric processors in the sector," Serafina continued. "Resources aren't limited. They're hoarded, controlled, weaponized." The Martian Federation delegate spoke for the first time. "The Empress raises valid concerns. We've seen similar patterns in our mining stations. Always the same story efficiency that somehow only flows upward." "If I may," another delegate interjected, the representative from the outer colonies. "We've run preliminary models on the open source system. Implementation would cost us nothing. Maintenance would be transparent. And it includes something Heliarch's system lacks: community oversight protocols." "Community oversight is another term for mob rule," Thorne insisted. "Do you really want your oxygen supply subject to popular vote?" "I want it subject to human need," the delegate replied, "which seems to be a foreign concept to Heliarch." Alex sensed the momentum shifting. Time for the final push. "Director Thorne is right about one thing. This is about more than software. It's about what kind of future we're building. One where breath is a commodity to be traded, or one where it's a right to be protected." "Rights don't maintain fusion cores," Thorne snapped. "Rights don't replace carbon scrubbers or repair micrometeorite damage. Credits do. Investment does. Heliarch does." "No." Rosa's voice came from the gallery. Alex turned to see her standing with dozens of other technicians and engineers. "We do. Every fusion core on this station. Every scrubber. Every repair done by people Heliarch considers inefficient. People whose children breathe less, so shareholders can profit more." "This is a closed session," Thorne said sharply. "Security, remove these." "Let them speak," Serafina commanded, her voice carrying imperial authority. "Or shall we add silencing workers to Heliarch's list of optimizations?" More voices rose from the gallery. Workers sharing stories of choosing between food and air credits. Parents describing their children's lethargy in low oxygen zones. engineers detailing how their repair schedules were constantly cut to boost quarterly profits. Through it all, Thorne stood rigid, his augmented eyes flickering with rapid calculations. Alex could almost see him running scenarios, looking for the angle that would salvage his position. Finally, Thorne raised a hand for silence. These are all tragic stories, and I propose we address them through the expanded oxygen credit system. More zones mean more precise control. More precision means better allocation to those truly in need. More zones mean more ways to discriminate, Alex countered. The solution isn't more control, it's less. The open source system has one zone everyone, one priority survival, one goal, breathe free. Naive idealism is what built the emergency systems that saved the station 6 hours ago, Serafina finished. While your precisely controlled systems tried to suffocate thousands, a technical malfunction that your investigation will blame on us, Alex said. We know the playbook, Director. But here's what you didn't count on. We don't care about your investigations or your blame. We care about breathing. And we've shown everyone in this chamber that there's another way. The vote, when it came, was closer than Alex had hoped, but decisive enough to matter. 7 systems committed to implementing the open-source atmospheric management system. 3 more wanted trial periods. Even those who voted to maintain Heliarch contracts demanded oversight changes and community input. Thorne's expression never changed. But Alex saw the moment he realized he'd lost. The silver implants dimmed slightly, data streams slowing. The Council has spoken, Thorne said with icy professionalism. Heliarch will, of course, cooperate with all transitions. Though I feel compelled to warn that abandoning proven systems for untested code may have unforeseen consequences. The only consequence that matters, Serafina said, is that children will breathe easier tonight than they did yesterday. As delegates began logging off and the chamber emptied, Thorne approached them, up close. Alex could see the exhaustion beneath the corporate polish. You think you've won, Thorne said quietly. But you've just exchanged one system for another. In 5 years, 10, someone will find ways to exploit your precious open source. Someone always does. Maybe, Alex acknowledged, but it won't be hidden, won't be proprietary. People will see it happening and have the tools to fight back. Such faith in humanity, Thorne mused. I had that once. Before I learned that efficiency requires hierarchy, that resources require management, that breath. He paused, something almost human flickering in his augmented eyes. That breath requires purpose. Breath is purpose, Serafina said simply. The rest is just what we build afterward. Thorne studied them for a long moment, the alien Empress and the human engineer, bound by crisis and hope. Then he turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing in the empty chamber. Think he'll cause trouble? Alex asked. Undoubtedly, Serafina replied. But not today. Today, we breathe. They stood in the quiet chamber, the weight of what they'd accomplished settling over them. The open-source system was already propagating across networks, being downloaded and adapted by stations and colonies throughout the sector. Each implementation would be different, tailored to local needs, but all would share the same core principle: air first, everything else second. So, Alex said eventually, what happens now to us? I mean, the tethering. Serafina looked down at where her tail coiled around his wrist. Traditional texts say it ends when the life debt is balanced, when the saved has saved the savior in return. And have you saved me? Have I? She tilted her head, those color-shifting eyes thoughtful. I've helped you confront your past, given you purpose, stood beside you as you rewrote the code of your youth into something magnificent. Is that salvation? I've been saved by worse things, Alex said with a slight smile. But somehow, I don't think this is about traditional interpretations anymore.
No, Serafina agreed. It's not. She was quiet for a moment, then spoke with deliberate care. In my culture, the tethering can end when balance is achieved. Or, she paused, harmonics shifting to something Alex had never heard before. Or it can be chosen, transformed from obligation to intention.
And if it's chosen,
Then it becomes something else entirely. Not savior and saved, not guardian and guarded, but... She seemed to struggle for words in Terran Standard. Partners, in the truest sense. Alex felt the weight of the moment. In the past 2 days, he'd gone from maintaining the status quo to overthrowing it, from fixing systems to rebuilding them, from being alone to being inextricably connected to someone who saw the universe through completely different eyes, yet somehow shared his vision of it. I was thinking, he said carefully, that someone needs to oversee the implementation of the open source system. Make sure it's not corrupted or commercialized. Could take years, decades, even a lifetime's work, Serafina agreed. It would require someone with technical knowledge and political connections. Someone who understands both the code and the communities it serves. Someone human and someone Aurelian. Working together, Alex continued. Proving that cooperation isn't just possible but powerful. Someone connected by more than tradition or accident, Serafina added, her tail pulsing gently. Connected by choice, by purpose, by the mutual understanding that every breath matters. They stood facing each other, the empty council chamber around them, the future sprawling before them full of challenges and possibilities. Outside, Alex knew. People were already breathing easier. Children were playing with energy they hadn't had in months. Workers were standing straighter, thinking clearer, living fuller. So, he said, extending his free hand to her. Partners. She took his hand, her alien fingers interlacing with his human ones. Partners. Her tail shifted around his wrist. Still there, still connected. But the sensation was different now. Not the automatic grip of obligation, but something more deliberate. A choice, renewed with each heartbeat. Although, Serafina said, with what he was learning to recognize as Aurelian humor, I should warn you that my diplomatic quarters are being renovated to include a human-standard atmospheric lab. It seems I'll be spending considerable time working on implementation details. What a coincidence, Alex replied. I've been thinking of adding an Aurelian meditation chamber to my workshop. For optimal cross-species collaboration, of course. Of course, she agreed solemnly, though her eyes sparkled with amusement. Purely professional accommodation. They left the chamber together, walking through corridors where people had gathered to watch the summit results. Cheers erupted as they passed not the orchestrated approval of corporate events, but the raw joy of people who just learned they could afford to breathe deeply. Nika appeared with her ever-present recorder. The engineer who rewrote the air and the Empress who breathes with her people. Care to comment on what's next? Work, Alex said simply. Lots of work, making sure this system serves everyone who needs it. Hope, Serafina added, that what we've built here spreads beyond atmospheric management. That cooperation becomes more profitable than exploitation. Love, Nika suggested with a knowing smile, gesturing to their still connected forms. Alex and Serafina exchanged glances, a whole conversation in a look. Partnership, they said in unison. As they walked toward the future they'd helped build. Alex reflected on the strange journey that had brought them here. A pressure leak, a desperate grab, a tail wrapped around a wrist. Such small actions. Yet they'd shifted the course of worlds. No regrets, Serafina asked quietly. About which part? Destroying a corporate monopoly, saving thousands of lives, getting permanently attached to alien royalty. Any of it, all of it. Alex thought of his old life safe, predictable, maintaining systems he'd never questioned. Then he looked at the woman beside him,
at the people around them breathing freely, at the future they'd made possible. "No regrets," he said firmly. "Not one." Serafina's tail pulsed warm around his wrist. Approval, affection, and promise all in one gesture. Together, they walked into whatever came next, bound by choice and purpose, breathing the free air they'd fought to protect. Behind them, the council chamber's screens still displayed the voting results. But more importantly, they showed download statistics for the open-source atmospheric management system, numbers climbing by the second, as stations and colonies across the sector chose breath over profit, life over efficiency, hope over control. The revolution was just beginning. But for now, for this moment, it was enough to walk together through corridors filled with people taking deep, free breaths, their children laughing with unrationed joy, their future finally as open as the code that would keep them breathing. In the end, Alex thought, it really was that simple. Air for all, breath for life, and sometimes, if you were very lucky, a partnership that transcended species, tradition, and expectation to become something altogether extraordinary. Her tail around his wrist, his hand in hers, and ahead of them, a universe of possibilities, each one beginning with the simple, revolutionary act of breathing free.